So this next guest is Vaunda Micheaux Nelson, and she writes children's books and young adult fiction, and she has quite a few books that have been published over the years. And before we get started with the about your book that's coming up, you have a book that's coming out soon. But I had a question about your, I assume is your maiden name, Michelle.
Yes, ma'am.
Are
Yes.
you related to Oscar Michelle?
Well, actually, I wanted to find that out because I love family history. I'm not really sure. And at first I thought, well, we probably aren't because my father's generation, our name used to be spelled Michaux. And my father's generation, I'm not sure exactly why, added an E. And I don't know whether they wanted to spell it like Oscars or not. And so I thought, well, probably we aren't related. However, in looking at a biography of Oscar Micheaux, in the early chapters, it talks about his name, and apparently his original spelling was AUX. And so I don't know whether we're related or not. It would be nice, but I've never heard anyone in the family say that we were.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know who Oscar Michelle was, he was a black filmmaker. And a lot of people think that, Spike
And
Lee
author.
knew
He
was
also
him.
wrote books.
He
Yeah.
did. But people don't realize that he was in between 1919 and 1948. He produced and directed 44 feature films.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have no idea that he even existed. Um, but he's part of African American history that doesn't get talked about. And when I saw your name, I said, I'm going to ask her if she was related to him. But sometimes the names change for whatever reason in, history, people add things. My maiden name is Day with an E, Daye.
Daye.
But when we looked at some genealogy, some of our ancestors didn't have the E. So we don't know exactly when the E got added.
Yes, yes. Well, one thing too to know is that even though I don't think I'm related to Oscar, my great uncle Louis Micheaux, some people may know about his bookstore that he had in Harlem that opened in the 30s and closed in the mid 70s. That was all Black books and really became a kind of a gathering place for a lot of the African American movers and shakers at the time. And I did do a couple of books on him, one for what young adults, and one was a picture book for younger readers
And
about
what
him
was
in
the
the
name of the
bookstore.
bookstore that he had?
It was the National Memorial African Bookstore in Harlem. It was a very historic place. And a
That's
lot of
kind of a
people don't know
trailblazer.
about him. But that's one of the reasons that I wrote the books when I was doing some family history and finding out about him myself. At first, I thought I was just going to be, doing something, putting something together for the family. But the more I found out about him and his journey, the more I
Mhm.
thought this is a story for everyone. So that's why I ended up putting it out there for hopefully, both children and young people and adults to learn
Right.
about him in the store.
Oh, that's wonderful because I mean, it's basically a trailblazer for Black-owned bookstores.
Yes, absolutely. And independent stores as well. I mean, I'm a
Yes.
very strong advocate for keeping those independent stores alive. And there are still Black bookstores around the country, but his sadly closed in the mid 70s. And these are the two. This is the young adult book, No Crystal Stair.
Okay.
And then the picture book is The Book Itch, Freedom,
Oh, wow.
Freedom, Truth, and Harlem's Greatest Bookstore. And this one is
Oh,
No Crystal Stair, a documentary novel of the life and work of Louis Micheaux, Harlem bookseller. So,
I've got to say you scared me when all I saw was itch. I'm like, what is the name of that book?
well, it's called that because when interviewed and asked about, his starting the bookstore and the
Mhm.
idea, he said, I got the book itch.
Love it.
wow. That's amazing. See, that's the information that I didn't know about you. And so I'm glad that you are discussing this. And these are things that people need to know. And there's a book that's scheduled to be released next year about Black bookstores. And I wish I had it in front of me because the person who wrote it actually called me to interview me on the phone. Um, I feel like it's going to come out in the spring. Um, are you aware of it?
Well, if it's someone talked to me too about it, and um I don't remember what the title is. I think it's something like prose.
Yes, prose is in the title.
Yes,
Yes.
actually, if it's the same title, I have a piece in there. They asked me to write something for it about the bookstore, about my uncle's bookstore. So
Oh,
Oh,
wonderful!
that's
Because
wonderful.
I was wondering, had
Prose for the
they?
People. Prose for the People, I think it's
Okay,
called. Yeah,
okay, all right.
yeah.
So we're going to work on getting her on the show, the author of the book on the show when
That'd
the
be
book comes out. Now, how many books have you produced so far?
well, I published this new one coming out, Radiant, is
Okay.
my 19th book for you.
Oh,
And I'm
okay.
really excited about that.
And
Okay.
then and that book you're doing the book launch actually very soon.
Yes, on January 7th, here in New Mexico, where I live, at a bookstore, the Books on the Bosque. On,
Oh,
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
thank you very much. I think it'll be a great time.
yeah. Now,
So
are
can
you
you
from New Mexico?
Not originally. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, the
oh,
Pittsburgh area, small river town.
Okay.
And I moved out here about 30 years ago. A job brought me out here. I spent most of my working life as a children's librarian, and writing was also, I was doing that at the same time, of course, juggling two careers in a way. But so I worked with kids and books for most of my working career.
Okay.
wonderful. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about Radiant?
Well, it's historical fiction. It's a middle grade novel in verse, and my first novel in verse actually was a challenge for me and to try a new format. But it takes place in 1963, 64. It's about a 10-year-old girl who's oh, and also it's kind of against the historical backdrop of the Birmingham church bombing, the Kennedy assassination, Ed Sullivan and Beatlemania, all of those things kind of play a part in the book. But it's about a young girl who she's sort of just trying to find her way and struggling with her identity. And her mother at some point has said that in order to shine, and Cooper Dale, the main character, wants to shine. She wants to be radiant. She wants to be special. Um, Her mom said in order to shine, she may have to work harder than
Mhm.
some other people, people who are white. And Cooper kind of takes that to heart, and and sometimes wishes she were white. And so she is dealing with the whole issue of just dealing with being a colored girl in in the world. And but she goes to a predominantly white school, but she also goes to an all black church. And so she is in two worlds and loves being um, a brown person, a black person in church, but in school it's a little more challenging because she's got kind of an extra strict teacher this year, and there's a bully at school who won't let her forget she's the only a black student in the class. So that's sort of what this is about, and it's based on quite a bit of my own experience growing up. It's not about, autobiographic book,
Mhm.
but I did draw from a lot of my own experience in creating. It is fiction, but actually, I had a lot of fun going back to that era and reliving those years of the 1960s because they were difficult years in many ways, but in many ways it was a simpler time, and it was kind of nice to be there. for a while.
And I think that's such a sad reality for so many children of the 60s and 70s because we were just getting into the Black is Beautiful movement.
Yes.
But many of us, like for instance, I grew up in a military environment where most of the kids I went to school with were white. And the white girls were the pretty girls. The white girls were the popular girls. And many of the Black girls were either trying to fit in with the white girls or trying to find our own footing. So we
Mm.
weren't always thought of as the pretty girls.
Yeah.
And so I remember Whoopi Goldberg back in the 80s when she did her one woman show. And one of the characters that she played was the little girl who would put the white sheet on her head and talk about her long, luxurious blonde hair because she didn't want to be Black anymore. She wanted to be white. So I think it's easy now for kids in the 90s and the 2000s, the new millennials, so to speak, to say, I can't believe you would ever say you wanted to be white. Black is beautiful. You should be proud to be Black. But that was something that we had to kind of grow into.
That's exactly right. And one thing though about Cooper is that she's pretty lucky in many ways. She's smart. She's got a really strong family. She's got faith. A lot of the book takes place in her with her relationship with her church and what she takes away from her spiritual life.
Mhm.
But she's got a strong family, and I think that really helps her through this situation. And I pray for that for all of our young people to have
Yes.
a place, that safe place to go, that home represents something, a place that's a place of safety and love and support.
Yeah, through those years in the 60s when, um, not the 50s as much, because the 50s, it was just getting started. And even though Brown versus Board was in the 50s, things didn't really start to pick up as far as school integration until the 60s.
Yes.
Um, but because of the Black church being so central to our culture and our communities, that really created a balance
Mm.
for some of the children who were in schools where there were only a few Black people. Um, and without the church, it's I'm not sure that they would have had the been able to tolerate it
Well,
as
yeah.
well.
Like for me, as I said, I grew up went to a predominantly white school, as just like Cooper, and an all black church, basically, predominantly black church. Um, and I feel in a way grateful for that because I feel like I learned to feel comfortable in any situation, wherever I am now. As I grew older, I think that experience really helped me be stronger as an individual in any situation and to just feel like I fit in, regardless of, the who the people are around me in this situation. So, and I hope that that's what happens with Cooper ultimately. We don't go that far in her life. It's only one school year, but
Oh,
I
okay.
wish that for her.
Okay, so it covers one school year.
Yes,
So
it
what
starts it
grade
starts in
is
the
she?
fall of 63 and ends like in the following June.
So what grade is she in the book?
She's in fifth grade.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, 10 years
She's,
old.
Pivotal year, about
Before
10 years
puberty.
old.
yeah, she's about 10. She's 10 years
Yeah.
old.
You're not exactly a little girl anymore, but you're not
Right. But
exactly a
not a
teenager
teenager.
yet.
Yeah. She's at that place where she's really finding her way. She's kind of that coming of age sort of thing. And I remember that year myself, because the Kennedy assassination, I think, we weren't used to being exposed to that kind of violence growing up, um,
Hmm.
because we were more protected from it. Our families protected us from a lot of the bad news. And we only saw the news in the morning and at lunchtime and at 6 o'clock and at 10 for like 15 minutes or a half an hour. Now it's 24-hour news,
Right.
which I think is healthy. but that's a whole other story. Um, but I think that it, I lost my train of thought. I was
David, it
telling that
happens.
for,
Well, you're talking about the Kennedy assassination.
oh yes,
Mhm.
that, thank you.
Mhm.
That that was in a way, there was a certain amount of maturity, I think, that happened with a lot of us when after that, um, after that experience of losing the president in that way, in that violent way. And I'm sure everyone who was alive at that point and of a certain age remembers very vividly that
Hmm.
day and where they were and what they were doing. Um, and there's a scene in the book dealing with that when they learn about that Kennedy has been killed and how the people around react. But I think that sort of was part of a little bit of a maturing process. So when I was 10, that happened. And then there were things like the Malcolm X statement and about the Kennedy assassination,
Right,
all those
right.
kinds of things that are discussed, in the home and also sometimes outside of it. But as I said, a fifth grader wasn't going to be as exposed to a lot of that as they are now, as children that age are now. And so it was probably, well, it was kind of shocking. It was very shocking for us
Yeah,
at that time.
yeah, for the whole country. That's one of those, crucibles in history. Um, Similar to, well, for later generations, I know 9/11 was a major event where people
Yes.
remember where they were when
Right.
all
Then
that.
the things that play out right in front of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, 9/11 happened in front of people's eyes.
right. It was
Yes.
very shocking. And my
Literally.
daughter's too young to remember it. She was, let's see, she was 5. So they brought them home from school. But at 5, you can't grasp, what's really going on.
Mm.
The way, and when I described it to her, it was a seminal event in America at the time. And the memories have faded now. Um, and some people, like people who are her age or early 20s, they weren't even alive, or they know nothing about 9/11.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it
Yeah.
it's
was
just a moment in history for them, but for
right,
us who actually saw it, experienced it, it's because of 9/11. I went to Afghanistan.
Mhm.
This is a part of
mhm,
our lives. This is
Yes.
forever going to be stitched in our lives.
Well, I remember that morning, my sister called me. Yeah, I was getting ready for work at the
Yeah,
library.
me too.
And my sister called me and she said, "Are you watching television?" I said, "No." She said, "Turn it on." And I turned it on, and the second of plane went into the building.
yeah,
And it was like, oh my gosh, I mean, it was just like, I remember that moment. And
yeah,
then when I went to work, there was this silence and
yeah.
it was so quiet.
Everyone was just shocked. We we were-
Mhm.
we were at our office because we have a business, and I think someone called and said, "Are you watching?" And we had a television there, so they told us to call. I mean, they called us and said, "Turn the TV on."
Yeah.
So, and that was before the second plane. So this was just incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these events are very jarring, and some of them one positive event in the last 20 years or so that occurred was the election of the first Black president. That whole process was very life changing, for a lot of people and for the country.
Mhm. Yes.
So, and that was a positive one,
Yeah. All those moments in history. I love history. And that's sort of the reason why I write so much about it. I mean, I've done nonfiction Black history books for kids and also historical fiction. But I think part of the reason that I've kind of latched on to it is because growing up, we really didn't have very much. And so
Right.
as an adult, I feel like I'm just playing catch up. And so when I find a subject that I'm interested in, a topic, a person from our past, I want to know. I mean, I certainly am ultimately would like to get the story out to others, but my first motivation for um, looking into this story, researching it, is because I want to know about this person. Why didn't I know about this?
Right.
And when you find out, it's like, this person's amazing. Everybody should know about him. And that's the reason that I put these books out there. I want young people and adults to learn about people that have never really been gotten their due, in our history. And it's American history. It's Black history, yes, but
Mhm. But
it's
sometimes it
American
depends on who
history
talks
of our
about it
country.
most.
Yeah.
That's why more people know about Madam C.J. Walker than they do Annie Turnbull Malone,
Hmm.
because more people talk about Madam C.J. Walker.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Rosa Parks versus Claudette Colvin. I think something is coming
Exactly.
out with about a book or something is coming out soon, or just came out about Claudette Colvin. So now you have won several awards. So for your books.
That's been
So
really wonderful.
yeah, tell us about that because you won several, and you're to be congratulated about that.
Thank you so much.
Tell
Well,
us the
my
ones
first
that
big one, and I'm still pinching myself, that it happened. But well, certainly an earlier book, Almost a Freedom, my illustrator got an award, which was wonderful. So I was sort of riding on his coattails. He did a great job. But my first big award was for Bad News for Outlaws. It's the Remarkable Life of Bass Reeves, Deputy U.S. Marshal. I did this in 2009. And it would receive the Coretta Scott King author book from American. It's an organization through American Library Association.
And you
Which,
actually won that award twice, right?
yes, I got the award for this, and also an honor book for the book Itch,
okay.
and an
Okay.
honor book actually for No Crystal Stair. And this one actually won the Boston Globe Hornbook Award for YA fiction, which I was real thrilled
Oh,
about. But
okay.
but I I love writing for writing, period. I mean, I need to write. It's like my sanity.
Mm.
It's a place for me to go to into my own world where I can control and be away from the rest of the real world. Um, but I really love this character, and you probably have heard about Bass Reeves now because of late there's been more out there about his story. He was a Black Deputy U.S. Marshal back in the Old West. And again, that was fun for me to go back to the Old West because when growing up, we loved cowboys and pretended to be, our people like, the Lone Ranger and um, the Rifleman and the characters from Bonanza and Wyatt Earp and all those guys. But anyway, so that was fun for me. But and I put my stories out there, hoping they're great stories that kids love them, that adults love them. But when a committee of people look at your work and they decide to honor it with an award, there's just no feeling like it because as a writer, you work really hard on these projects, sometimes for years. And it just feels good whenever you feel like somebody noticed, you know,
Mm.
Yes.
that
Yes.
that somebody really noticed how hard you worked on this and that they agree that this is a great story. It just
Yeah.
feels,
The validation is great.
it
Now,
Yeah, when
really,
when you're recognized by your peers and they see what you're doing and they appreciate your work, I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And I did want to say too about people like Bass Reeves. When we were growing up, I said we really loved the Old West. But when I found out about Bass, this Black man, who was a slave and rose to be a deputy U.S. Marshal, and of actually one of the most effective U.S. Marshals that was out that ever lived. It made me think back on my childhood, how we pretended to be certain, or like our idols from the West. And sometimes we fought over who got to be this person, this today, and who got to play this role and that sort of thing. And I thought, if when I was a kid and if I knew about Bass Reeves when I was a kid, and he was among the people that we wanted to emulate, to pretend to be, that I wonder what that might have done for my own image of myself as a Black child in the world. And so I put books like this out. Like there's another Black. This is a biography too about a Black rodeo bronco buster, George Fletcher, that I never knew about. Most people don't know about, but these are true stories. And I want young people to see, and adults, and I want children of color, and also I want all children to read these stories and know these people that have accomplished these great things, and to see them as like part of all of our history. So anyway, that's a lot of my motivation for writing.
Well,
I
we're
wish
at
we
the
could
end
talk
of our
longer.
time,
Yeah.
but I did mention to you that this was going to be conversational and no pressure. See,
Thanks, I
I'm
appreciate
so
it.
glad. So, but we appreciate you. And someone from the Coretta Scott King, the awards was on the show. We met her at the Black Librarians Conference in New Orleans this
Oh,
summer, and she was on the show shortly after that. She's on the
Yes.
committee that picks the books. I
there's
can't
some
remember
great
it right
people.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
obviously I have a special place in my heart for them.
yeah.
They've been very kind to me.
Okay, well, have a great holiday, and thank you so much for being on the show. And
Yes,
congratulations
and please
on your
read my new
success.
book. I love the
Her
verse
book comes
novel.
out. Yeah, it comes out January 5th.
Seven,
Seven.
seven,
January
and
7th.
again, it's a novel in verse, and that was a whole new format, and if you've never read a novel in verse, it'd be a great time to try it. There's some great ones out there for youth and adults, so take a look
Okay,
at
and
what's
you
out.
can pre-order it now on Amazon. I already checked that out. So thanks so much, Wanda, for
Thank you
being.
so much for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
You're
You have a
welcome.
wonderful evening and
Thanks.
congratulations again on your book.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.